I am absolutely delighted to welcome our first guest of this morning. Wendy and I have known each other for quite a few years. We worked together on London 2012 and other projects. Wendy is a big football fan, travelling both locally at home in the UK, but also travelling around the world to follow football. She's an access advisor on assistance dogs and the independent disability advisor to the London Metropolitan Police. Can I please welcome on stage Wendy Morrell and her lovely dog?
Come. You. Are you going to follow?
Can someone help, please?
Come on. I don't think he likes the ramp.
Will Mike come up with him, or will he jump up?
Come on. Good boy.
Good boy.
Judy.
Thank you. Can I also invite onto stage, please, from Estonia, our guest that we're really pleased to have with us, Indrek Petersuu, Development and PR Manager at FC Levada Tallinn, and Kristel Soginbits, Project Manager of the Estonian Assistance Dog Centre in Estonia. Crystal. Hi. Hi. Thank you. Wendy, you're going to start with a presentation for us to help us understand better the importance of stadiums welcoming assistance dogs for any number of reasons that are partners to disabled people. So if I may, I will hand over to you and let you do the presentation. You press that quite hard and it
will advance.
Yeah,
okay,
super.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Firstly, I just want to say, forgive me, I need to rely quite heavily on notes because I have a rubbish memory. I just settled my dog down. And the other thing that I would like to just say is that if you think that my slides are showing two slightly different dogs, that's true. The first part of the presentation, there are photographs of my first assistance dog, Caesar. And towards the second half of the presentation, there will be photographs of Udo and other dogs as well. Do you have to
want me to do
point
it?
it?
Quite hard, Joe. Just point it and push hard. That's it.
Okay. What I wanted to do is just really give you some background about my circumstances and my desire to be accompanied by an assistance dog. Sometimes it's very difficult for people to perhaps perceive the reason for assistance dogs that do tasks other than the obvious guiding or helping people who are hearing impaired. And in terms of my personal story, I've been involved in sport one way or another all of my life, and I grew up in a family of keen sports enthusiasts. And I was partaking in sport myself, and fitness and leisure in some form or another were very important to me. And some of my cousins played full-time football, one professionally for the same club, which is now in the Premiership for 10 years. In my teens, my dream was to teach physical education, but I had a succession of injuries and changed my career plan. And I eventually did become a teacher, but became a teacher of mathematics. And that caused me to switch sports, really. I came into contact with a physiotherapist who suggested that there were sports that I could still partake in, even though I had a lot of trouble with my knees. And this was really around the early to mid-1980s, in the days really before parasport existed as we recognize it today. So I took a starter course in archery, and much to my surprise, I became quite good. Very quickly, I was breaking national records. But then again, at the beginning of parasport, it was quite easy to break records because there weren't that many to start with. But within a year or so, I was selected to go for a training weekend for the European Indoor Championships. And because of the lack of organisation and mismanagement of the event, I was struck in the head by a discus that had been thrown indoors, which caused me to have quite a severe brain injury. And so, for me, life suddenly took a turn from having a succession of sports injuries to having quite a profound brain injury. And that left me more dependent on using a wheelchair and more dependent on using the help of others to do very mundane, everyday tasks. Being independent, I don't really like having people to assist me. And I found that not everybody who was paid to assist me was 100% honest. And I watched a television program one day and I saw somebody with an assistance dog doing tasks for them in their home and helping them get dressed and so on. And I thought, yeah, I want one of those, because a dog isn't going to arrive late for work, a dog isn't going to steal from me, a dog isn't going to answer me back, although actually Udo does sometimes. So in 2000, I was partnered with my first assistance dog, Caesar. And very quickly, being partnered with this dog, I regained a lot of confidence. My speech improved. For about 18 months after my injury, I could only say 4 words. And those 4 words were yes, no, a word beginning with F, and off. And I guess I found that within the health service and the people who were looking after me, 4 words could get me quite a long way, really. But once I'd got my first golden retriever, Caesar, I recognized that obviously I needed to go out of the house and be accompanied by my dog, and I needed to take him out for exercise and recreation for him. And suddenly I became more motivated to do other things. Sometimes it's very easy to lay in bed in the morning and just think, oh, I'll just have another half an hour. I'll just have another half an hour. But if a dog needs you to get up and let it out to go to the toilet, then maybe what we might deny ourselves, we wouldn't deny an animal that can't help itself. So through my dogs, I started, my comfort zone got much bigger. And things weren't always easy. Some places wouldn't allow me to enter when I was accompanied by my assistance dog. You can see on the side a picture of Caesar outside the Louvre. We were able to get from London to Paris, but unfortunately when we got to the door of the Louvre, we weren't allowed in, so Caesar never did get to see the Mona Lisa. However, I'm delighted to say that when we reached Amsterdam, he did get to see Van Gogh's sunflowers in the Van Gogh Museum. So I was frustrated with being able to be welcome in some places and not in others. And it was always very difficult knowing whether I would be welcome or not. And that fact was actually illustrated very well yesterday when I arrived at the gate to the stadium. We all came through the same entrance, but when my name was ticked off, I was taken to one side by the security who had been informed that we were coming, and the security man was saying, "It's a dog." And I'm saying, "Yes, it's a dog." My French is very, very poor, but it does run to chien. And so we had to wait there while he sought permission from his superior. He wasn't autonomous. He wasn't able to make his own decision. And he wasn't able to see that this was a dog that accompanied me as a disabled person and recognized that we were welcome. So immediately at the door even of this conference, we were confronted with what would be regarded as an access issue. So I got involved, because I was frustrated with things like that, I got involved with various committees and organizations and started learning about how the laws and customs in different countries varied tremendously, even through continental Europe, just with regard to assistance dogs. And quickly I became very aware that this wasn't going to be a simple job to change not only laws, but people's attitudes towards dogs. In the UK, we had the Disability Discrimination Act, and in 2010 we had an Equality Act that helped tremendously in that all recognised assistance dogs must be allowed to accompany their partner to all places where the general public are allowed to go. There are one or two exceptions, and I think that's probably fair enough. If the dog would substantially change the environment of the place where the person wanted to go with their dog, then it may be a little bit negotiable. But I'm thinking in terms of maybe some departments of hospitals, so perhaps a ward where people have had surgery, where maybe dog dander or hair might cause a problem in the air and so on. It might be a little unfair to take a dog to a zoo, for example. So I'm fairly easygoing about that. But in general, in the UK, my dog can go where I go. You can see that Caesar himself was quite well travelled, so that meant everything was great, but actually it didn't. You can see on the photograph with the aircraft that was on Air Alps, and I'd flown to Salzburg and managed to get there safely, but on the way back, when I checked in to fly back to, I think, Vienna and then to London, they decided that the pilot had to come and look at the dog and decide whether he wanted the dog on his aircraft or not. And the other photograph reminds me in Frankfurt. I went to speak at a conference, and knowing that there might be difficulties, I went with a letter from a German assistance dog organization explaining I was coming as a guest to their conference and I was the speaker, and you know, it's fine, my dog is well trained, and an introduction like this. And I went to Lidl to buy a bottle of water for my dog, and I was stopped. And so I thought, oh, this is okay. I handed the lady my letter, and she read the letter and then looked at me and said, yes, it's a dog, but you're not blind. So because it wasn't a guide dog, I wasn't allowed in Lidl in Frankfurt. And this really focused for me that assistance dog partners, not everyone is equal. In many respects, guide dog partners have a lot of history on their side, because across Europe we have been familiar with guide dogs since really the end of the First World War, and people can very simply see the role of a guide dog and understand that, and perhaps wouldn't challenge the presence of a guide dog so easily. But with an assistance dog like mine who is sitting here, sometimes it takes people a few moments to think why I might need the dog actually with me. So as time has gone on, though, guide dogs are now obviously not the only type of assistance dog. We have lots of different types of assistance dogs. It's fairly self-explanatory what guide dogs do. Many people have heard of them, but there are now many other types of assistance dogs. So apart from dogs assisting people who are blind and visually impaired, and need dogs for wayfinding, we have hearing dogs who alert their partners to important noises around them, maybe their alarm clock or a fire alarm or if somebody is calling their name to attract their attention. And then we have mobility assistance dogs, and Udo here is a good example of a mobility assistance dog. If I drop something, he'll pick it up. If we are at home, he will go and retrieve things around the house. Because of my brain injury, I tend to be quite forgetful and put things down and forget where they are. So he knows the names of a number of key items like spectacles, purse, keys, iPhone, telephone, and so on. So sometimes when people call my house, they hear the phone, and there's a little bit of heavy breathing before they get to speak to somebody, because he's run and got the phone, and then he brings it back to me. He does a lot of other things as well. He empties the washing machine and can bring the milk in from the front doorstep and turn on and off the lights. It's really like having your own personal butler, except a butler probably wouldn't help you get dressed and undressed, and Udo does, and I'm really grateful to him for that. But mobility assistance dogs really is quite a broad category and help people with usually physical impairments in a lot of different ways. Then we come on to medical alert or response dogs, and we'd hoped that my partner might be here today with her medical alert dog. And medical alert dogs, perhaps the most significant category of medical alert dog is dogs that help people with diabetes. So people who have lost hypoglycemic awareness, and when their sugars are dropping, the dog can alert before they're aware themselves, so they can then take appropriate action. But medical alert dogs also have been developed now that help people with epilepsy, help people with Addison's disease. They might assist somebody with nut allergy. So, for example, if somebody came today who had a strong nut allergy, they may send their dog into the room with a handler, and the dog would walk around the room, and if there's any strong odor of nuts, then the person would know not to enter the room. And more recently, dogs have been trained to help with narcolepsy and give people appropriate warnings so that they can put themselves in a place of safety. Not so much in Europe, but more in the United States. You see quite a few psychiatric and mental health assistance dogs to help people, and quite often you'll see programs for veterans from the armed services, so people who perhaps suffer from PTSD or have night terrors. They wake in the night and think maybe they're in a war zone or something like this. And the dog, if it's fast asleep in the bed, then they know this can't be correct because the dog is still fast asleep. Or if they're scared to go into a room, they might send the dog in to check everything is okay first. The last category is another interesting category of dual-trained assistance dogs. And just as Joyce mentioned yesterday, a lot of people who have impairments don't have them in isolation. A lot of people tend to develop other medical conditions along the way, maybe alongside or as a result of their original impairment. So, for example, in my case, I have a brain injury which causes a physical impairment, but also I have epilepsy. And so a dual-trained dog will often be trained to do two things, either hearing and mobility, or guiding and hearing, or medical alert and mobility, and so on. So what I'm trying to do is explain that it's the scope of the type of task an assistance dog will do over the years has really expanded from guiding, and where it was just one task is now lots of things that these dogs can do. And I think that's important to remember when we're welcoming people, that the dogs will do different things. Oh, I've gone backwards. Thank you. Now, just as in many other walks of life, there is regulation of assistance dogs, but in Europe, primarily, we're concerned with our dogs being accredited by organizations, and many of the countries that you come from, I'm familiar with the organizations that train assistance dogs, and the overarching organizations that govern the training and standards of assistance dogs are Assistance Dogs International and the International Guide Dog Federation. And in Europe particularly, we look to Assistance Dogs Europe to bring the organizations together to share teaching and knowledge and standards, and also the European Guide Dog Federation. And historically, it has been a little bit difficult because, again, the guide dog organizations are established a much longer time, and so they have more disposable income, they can make more campaigns and so on. But you can find a lot more about these organizations online, and one of the significant things that happened last autumn was the coming together of Assistance Dogs Europe and the European Guide Dog Federation, so that we can lobby together rather than guide dogs going along and negotiating for their partnerships, and then assistance dog organizations lobbying for all the other partnerships. We've come together and lobbying together, and obviously, as with many things, when you're campaigning together, we're much stronger. We had a classic example of a situation when the Eurostar train started. There were no pet passports, and so no animals could travel on the Eurostar train. And then around 2003, 2004, the development of the European dog passport was really very good, because it meant that the dogs are recognized throughout Europe, and it's one document that can be shown everywhere. But Eurostar weren't sure how to cope with this, and they said, no, we're not taking any assistance dogs. And then Guide Dogs as an organization trotted off and said, yes, but you can do it just for us, can't you? So they were actually allowed on Eurostar 18 months before other assistance dogs. So while somebody who was visually impaired or blind could travel on Eurostar with their assistance dog, I couldn't travel with mine. And so it really is a tremendous move forward that the organizations are all moving together in the same direction. Moving on, you might be thinking about, why would somebody bring their assistance dog to a sporting event? If they're just going to watch football, then all they need to do is watch football, and what's the dog going to do? But it's important to remember that the dogs have undergone sometimes up to 2 years of training when they're very young, and before they're partnered with the person, and so they're very familiar with large crowds. They're not nervous of that sort of environment. They're taken when they're training to these sorts of places, and they've been trained to toilet appropriately, so there's no danger of there being any mess or accidents anywhere. And they can be calm and unobtrusive in various environments. You can see when I arrived here, Udo was a little bit energetic and bouncing and ready for the day, but now he's realized that I'm going to talk forever. He's decided that he's going to have a nap. So the other thing that people worry about too is hygiene and dogs in areas where food is served. And again, this very long and extensive training means that the dogs are appropriate in those circumstances. And in the UK, assistance dogs and guide dogs are exempt from rules that prevent other dogs entering premises where food is served, which again is something that you're going to find at a sports venue. But going back to why would somebody arrive at a football match with a dog, I asked some of my assistance dog friends what it means to them to take their dog to the football match with them, to be accompanied by their assistance dog. And my friend TW, he said his dog was an essential part of his health and well-being. His diabetes alert dog is literally his lifesaver. So having his diabetes alert dog means that he's more confident and able to go out into such a large environment in a crowd, and he has no fear of collapsing from a hypoglycemic episode because his dog is going to let him know and he can take care of that situation. Another person that I asked, LR, said that her seizure alert dog gives her 22 minutes warning. Exactly 22 minutes. So she can go to the first aid room for privacy and have a seizure. So she has time to go and find a steward, make it known that she's going to be unwell, and remove herself from any situation of danger. And so, again, another good reason why the dog should be there. Another person told me that they wouldn't be able to find their way there safely if they were going alone and without their guide dog. And the person who said this is a lady who has a couple of young children who enjoy going to football, and she enjoys taking them, but if she didn't have her guide dog, she wouldn't be able to do that. This one's me, and whilst my dog might not look like he's doing very much while I'm watching a game or while I'm doing something else, he's helped me have the confidence to get there. Certainly, I had a very distressing situation last night and this morning, and he gave me the confidence to get up and get on with the day, really, when it would have been an awful lot easier this morning to have stayed in bed. He picks up anything I drop. He helps me find my way out of buildings. If I get a bit disorientated, I can ask him to find the way out, and he'll get me out of a building. He helps me put my coat on, and so on, which is significant. If I'm going to football, I'm going to go with a jacket and everything else. And he helps me with my daily routine with reminders. So every time he needs to go to the bathroom, it reminds me that I need to go to the bathroom, and so on. So there are lots of very subtle ways that dogs are helping people that other people might not really perceive or might not recognize. And it's important to bear that in mind, that because the dogs have come from an organization, the person has already been through an application process, and the dog has been matched to help them with their impairment. This person, KR, said without her medical alert dog, she would be too scared to go to a large sporting event, as if he wasn't there to detect an alert and there was no notice of an impending Addison's crisis and a medical emergency. She might collapse in a large crowd, and that could cause a lot of difficulties, not only for her, but in terms of crowd control and safety. This is one of the ladies that gave me the quote. This is LR, the lady who said that her assistance dog gives her 22 minutes warning. And you can see she's happy there at Manchester City. I suppose somebody has to be. And she's sitting in, I think, what looks like easy access or amenity seating. And as you can see, the dog appears to be reasonably unobtrusive, and I'm sure is of great help to her. And so really what clubs need to be doing is asking what can they do to make fans and their assistance dogs feel welcome. And when I say welcome, I mean right from the beginning, from buying their ticket to the other end of the spectrum, going to the toilet. And once we get over the hurdle and accept that some fans are going to bring their assistance dogs for a variety of different personal needs, we need to be sure that they're going to feel welcome. Certainly yesterday, I kind of didn't feel welcome when the guy pulled me to one side and so on, although I had the confidence to know that I was known by people at this conference and they would make that representation and make sure that I came in. If I was going somewhere where I wasn't known, that might make me feel really quite nervous and quite upset, really. One of the major considerations we had with the London Olympics was we didn't want people to feel that they were being tolerated with their assistance dog. We wanted them to feel that they were welcome as a partnership, human and dog, coming together, so that people wouldn't feel that there was any discrimination against them. Because essentially asking somebody to leave their assistance dog at home is like asking somebody else to leave their crutches at home or leave their wheelchair at home. The other thing that I think I want to say at this point is to remember that assistance dogs can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. A medical alert dog particularly can be just a little teacup dog that might trot along and be very small, yet a mobility assistance dog or a guide dog might be quite larger. So they can go from really quite small Yorkshire Terriers to the size of a German Shepherd. In terms of ticketing, I think it's important that if clubs are aware in advance of the additional needs of spectators, they can ensure that the venue can be ready to assist and fulfill those needs. But there is a need to be flexible. If somebody, for example, hadn't anticipated bringing their assistance dog for some reason and then does, they still need accommodating. It's like anything, you can book a train ticket and book a ramp and you can be organized ahead of time, and on another day you might have just forgotten to do all of that. So it's important to make everybody to feel welcome, whether they've alerted you that they're coming or not. The one thing that I wanted to say, and we touched, I think, a little on this yesterday, was about the different types of seating. And one or two speakers I noticed recognize that many clubs recognize a wheelchair area and so on. But many assistance dog partners are ambulant and walking, and so maybe they don't wish to sit in the area for wheelchair users. Maybe they wish to sit in an easy access or amenity seat. It's very difficult sometimes to sit in a row situation where the dog might fall through the gap in front, you know, with the tilting seats. But often it's very simple to make more room around the seats, like you could see with Lynn there, so that the dog can either lay beside the person or just lay in front of them. This is my young friend Jason. He's a great football fan, but if you watch closely, he is actually at a rugby match. And that's because his local football club isn't very accessible. He doesn't feel welcome with his assistance dog, and so he stopped watching football and decided to go to the local rugby ground instead, where he's made most welcome. And you can see there that he's accompanied by his assistance dog, Zeke. And another thing that we touched on yesterday, Jason goes to football with his mum and dad and his assistance dog. So there in the red, you can see Jason's mum, Lorna, Jason's dog, Zeke, then Jason, and just the other side of him is his father. And again, in that circumstance, it's so important to be able to go to football and sit with your family and friends. You know? it would be very difficult in this situation for Jason to either choose to sit with his mother or choose to sit with his father, and then the other parent go and sit somewhere else. And so again, the real need to be flexible, I think, is very important. And there he is looking very proud of himself at the rugby ground. And I'm afraid I've forgotten which team he supports, but it looks like there's plenty of room there. Other considerations in making assistance dogs welcome in terms of the partnerships, it's important to ensure that staff are aware of the needs of the spectators and that they are assistance dog aware. Because some people may be fearful of dogs, some people may have religious observance or anxieties or allergies. But just about the worst thing that's happened to me is arriving at a check-in at an airport and one lady shouting at the top of her voice, "There's a wheelchair over there and a dog, and I'm scared the dog's going to bite me. Can you deal with them?" So it meant that everybody around heard. And of course, I understand that there may be differences, and there may be people who, for whatever reason, don't want to be too close to a dog. But the best thing to do is to do that calmly and unobtrusively, and that's really, again, what we worked with London 2012 with the security. If somebody had some religious observance and didn't want to be searching a dog or touching a dog, then they quietly went to their team leader and said, can we switch places? And everybody was assistance dog aware, everybody knew what was happening. So it's important not to create a fuss. In many respects, we need to plan ahead. Whether somebody is ambulant or using a wheelchair, an assistance dog partner will not be able to use a route that includes turnstiles. And you need to consider evacuation routes carefully. Experience has shown that you will have a far smoother transition and evacuation if you accept the fact that if there is an emergency evacuation, that you evacuate the dog and the person at the same time. In the early days, some aircraft decided that they weren't going to evacuate dogs. And the problem was then the person would say, "I'm not leaving my assistance dog." So the queue would back up behind them, and it would cause an awful lot of problems further back in the plane. And the same would happen at a football match. Somebody who is using their dog for guidance and wayfinding is going to leave the building much more quickly if they've got their dog with them than if they're worried that the dog is behind or the dog is loose. So again, it's important to accept that we need to take them both at the same time. So we need to just be prepared to be flexible, and assistance dog and guide dog partners, remember, they may choose to use an accessible lavatory because it's bigger. The chances are the floor is going to be dry and the dog isn't going to get up covered in whatever is on the floor. And be flexible in terms of last-minute seating location if the weather is severe. A couple of things that are important to remember with the seating. This photograph is of Udo, and it was taken at Wimbledon. And we arrived, and it was a scorching hot day, and the sun was directly on the dog, and immediately he was very hot. And they were very understanding and accepting and moved us to an area you can see by a wall where the shade, so the dog wasn't, there weren't any welfare issues, the dog was comfortable. Again, you can see we had 2 assistance dogs there. My partner had her dog there. Actually, the Labrador is watching the tennis, and we'd been moved out of the sun. Another thing that's important is most assistance dog partners will come prepared with dog bowls, water, and so on. But if you have a bowl, then it makes people more welcome. Always essential to have water, because remember, those guys on the security may well have taken the bottle of water that was meant for the dog away, and so it's important to be aware of that. Another thing that you can do to really top things up is to be aware of where the nearest veterinary centre is, so that if there is some incident, somebody trips over the dog or the dog becomes unwell, it will avoid a lot of time and panic if you know where the nearest veterinary centre is. Would you like me to stop there? Or?
I think that's a good place to stop.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you very much, Wendy. As you can see, this is a really important topic. It's actually not that difficult to make somebody with an assistance or guide dog welcome, but it's about awareness. A really classic example yesterday, we had advised on several occasions that we were welcoming delegates, including delegates with assistance dogs, to our conference, and yet, sadly, still Wendy was stopped and prevented for a time from coming into the stadium when all of you were arriving yesterday. I know...
Show the photos of the toilet.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Just, if I may, sorry, Joyce, I'm railroading you there. I'll just go through. This is at Wembley Stadium, an assistance dog relief area. And again, it's part of the hard landscaping and very useful, although in my view, it could be a little bit better if they had some bark chippings there, because dogs are often taught by their programs to go to the toilet on soft surfaces. This is a park in London with a dog toilet, very matter of fact there. That's very useful. The dog can go to the toilet on the lead. This is the assistance dog relief areas at London 2012, which I'm happy to own. I did that. I spent 5 years arguing for dog relief areas at every Olympic venue for London 2012. So when I die, if anybody is there, make sure on my headstone it said she cared about the toilets. You know? And you can see the soft surface there, and obviously the pseudo spending
Super.
his time
Thank you
there.
very much, Wendy. I really am going to have to stop you there, but that's been amazing. And I know from the reaction
with the poo
bags from the audience that there's a lot of information that really, I hope now, the clubs that are here, the national federations that are here, that all of us can understand why this is important and actually how easy it is to make sure that anybody that comes with an assistance or guide dog is welcome.